Hey everybody, I'm Jennifer Armentrout. It's really weird because I'm looking at myself on here and my cursor is like right in the middle of my face. Okay, I'm Jennifer Armentrout. I am the writer of these books. Blah. These were awesome, but let me get it so that you can see it. That is the first book that I wrote. Okay. And inspired by a conversation that I had last night on Twitter and a another person on YouTube called I can't remember what his channel's called, but his whole thing is Alex Reads Twilight, and I think he's in a band that does songs about Doctor Who, which makes him pretty ace in my book. Ace is a Doctor Who joke. She's a companion. All right. Anyway, well, he is ace in my book because he did the Alex Reads Twilight videos. And I'm not one of those, I'm not a vampire author that's going to like take sides or whatever. I personally didn't really care for Twilight, but he was very charming and British and awesome. I am none of those things. I am not charming, I'm not British, I'm not awesome, but I am going to read my own book, which is a big deal for me because I hardly ever read anything I write. And I don't, like sometimes I'll be at conferences and there will be authors that will be like, oh, I'm in love with my character. Oh, this is what's going to happen in this very teasy way. And I guess being really involved in your own story and really loving your own story helps to sell it. But I haven't been. And so this book was like on the USA Today bestseller list. And then after that, like I never got on that list again. And now I am still writing. Haha. I am still writing, but I'm writing under a pseudonym right now. Abigail Barnett. Go look her up if you like something a little racy. But I thought, man, maybe the reason the numbers dropped off or whatever in my series is because I wasn't out at all these conferences being like, this is what's going to happen to Cyrus, and we're in this big club, and we all just really love him, and I'm in love with all my characters as much as you are. Isn't that great? And like, people would say, I loved when this happened, and I'd be like, I don't remember writing that. I was like blackout drunk when I wrote that. It's that no, I was not blackout drunk when I wrote it, but that's the answer I sometimes gave. Well, I'm going to try to rectify that, dear readers, and people who haven't yet read my books but might because you see this and say, huh, that cover has an attractive neck and also an attractive ooh, it's backwards. An attractive thing. This is just like the Weatherman. I just spit everywhere. This is like the Weatherman at when I was at NBC on the studio tour, they had us do this thing where you had to, like one person, like I raised my hand because I was like, yeah, I want to do it because they broadcast it in the store downstairs in the NBC Experience store or whatever, which nobody's ever in, but it was exciting because I got to be on a big TV even though I didn't get to see it. And they're like, you could buy a DVD for $27, and I'm like, no, but I will have a good time doing it. Well, I sat down and I was like the person that read the news stories, and then there was a guy that was doing the weather, and he had to do it on a green screen. So he's up there and he's like this and whatever, but then the map was actually like on the other side. This is exactly what it's like because I look down here and I'm trying to like do the swoop. I can't because it's hard. Oh, my hand looks huge. Anyway, so I read the first chapter of my book. And I'm going to do this Alex Reads Twilight style. So I'm going to be brutal. I'm going to pull no punches, even though I'm sure this is probably the most brilliant book of all time. The other thing this will do is this book is out of print now. Ignore my makeup. I have no idea what I've been homesick all day long. I'm always home, but this time I was homesick, so I felt like it was a good excuse not to do anything. So I didn't, and instead I like played with makeup and stuff like that. So that's why I'm like all Elizabeth Taylor in Cleopatra. The gap in my teeth looks enormous when I talk too. I don't often see myself on camera. I'm not like a famous author. So like I see this gap in my teeth and all I can think about is how when I was younger I said I thought it made me look like Madonna, and then like my grandfather said no, it just makes you look buck-toothed, and I was like that's not fair, and then I don't know, I used to get teased a lot by my about my tooth gap, and it's really pronounced when I'm seeing it on here. Okay, so I read the first chapter of this book, and that was awesome. Ugh. And my dedication is like so, it's like I won the Oscar. I should have been like, thanks for helping me, guys, but instead it's like this page long ass thing of I got my book published and I'm so much better than everyone else. I have come a long way. Anyway. Wow. All right. Well, I read the first chapter, and in the first chapter of this book, that is now out of print, so you can use this as a primer if you want to go buy the rest of them that are in print. It starts off with Carrie Ames. She's a doctor now. She says so on page 1. She says, I'd gone from plain old Ms. Carrie Ames to Dr. Carrie Ames just 8 months prior to the night I now refer to as the big change. That sounds like menopause, Jen. What were you thinking? But what else are you going to call it? She's not thinking about menopause. She's young. Let's see. So she's living in Grand Rapids, Michigan. She's a doctor. The reason she's living in Grand Rapids is because I lived in Grand Rapids at the time, and I couldn't afford to, like, it's like, that was like the days when I wrote this, it's like Google Earth wasn't quite, you know, a thing yet, so it's not like I could go on the street view, and now people are like, I'm going to set my book in Rome, and they can tell you what the color of the bricks are, and the building on the corner of, you know, Il Gelato and Il Spaghetti Street, whatever they call streets. I don't speak, clearly, I don't speak Italian. No, Jen, you sounded like a native speaker of Italian. So, she's in the ER, and this guy comes in, and he's all gross. And I kind of grossed myself out when I read this, too, because, holy Moses. It says, puncture wounds peppered his chest. Some were small, but 4 or 5 were large enough to fit a baseball in. So, a baseball is big. Later on, it says, his jaw, or what was left of it, hung skinned from the front teeth to the splintered end, where it had been ripped from the joint to dangle uselessly from the other side of the skull. Above the gaping hole in his cheek, one eye socket stood empty and crushed, and the eye itself, an optical nerve completely missing. Man, like 22-year-old me had some real mental problems. Oh man. So anyway, this guy's laying there and he's all disgusting. And he's looking at her and she's looking at him and they're looking at each other. And she can't figure out how he's still alive. Because he's a vampire. Didn't you read this on the front of the book? So she's staring at the dude on the table who's all gross. And she gets freaked out, because you're going to when you see somebody who's like all ripped apart, especially like the way that I wrote it, and I was apparently like a wannabe serial killer. That's some Dexter level. Anyway, the lights went out. So she runs away. She vomits and runs away. Then later she's cleaned herself up and taken a moment, and she's in like the doctor's like locker room. I used to clean like the doctor's locker rooms at the hospital I used to work at, and they were all, doctors are messy and they don't care where they throw their shit. Pick up after yourselves, doctors. And you have godlike power over life and death, but pick up after yourselves. So this guy, Dr. Fuller, who she's really like, she really looks up to him. He comes in and he's like, hey, maybe you're not cut out to be a doctor, which is like her biggest fear, because like you do. So she thinks, what I'm going to do is I'm going to prove to myself that I can be a doctor, because I'm going to go to the morgue. Now, I don't know, like in the original draft, Carrie was a nurse, not a doctor, and I was like, it didn't make any sense for a nurse to go down to the morgue. Only orderlies go down to the morgue, and sometimes security goes down to the morgue. Well, other people go down to the morgue too, but very rarely doctors and anybody but pathologists and orderlies. So it didn't make any more sense, but that's what I did. So she walks in, and the guy gets up, and he has already killed one person. Oh, and that's how she finds him, too, because apparently I'm a big fan of movies. Well, I know I'm a big fan of movies. It's weird to talk about myself in the third person, but Jennifer Armentrout wrote this scene like it was a horror movie. She comes in, there's like this table, and she's like, oh, there's the dead body, and she pulls the thing off of him, and it's the guy that worked in the morgue! And then the John Doe grabs her and throws her into this cabinet, and then there's blood blood and gore, and of course in the cabin it's like organs and crap like that, and they it goes wink, she throws, and then there's glass and dead and dying and you know. So he stabs her and all this stuff, and first she calls for help. I've missed this very important step. I didn't in the book. I wrote it in the book. It's right here. She calls for help, but she calls for help, and then the John Doe, you know, glass and shards and very Dexter. I was like obsessed with like organs and fluid and gross yucky things. In fairness, I did just have a child when I started writing this, so you know, for part of the time, it was like most of the day, it was like my beautiful baby and bonding and first bath and belly button falling off and it's so adorable. And then like it became like then I'd go sit at the thing and after I went to sleep, you know, and I'd be like blood and gore and nightmares. So that's what happens, blood and gore and nightmares. And then she notices that the eye of the dude is the eye from the morgue worker, and John Doe has stolen his eye and put it in his own eye because I was freestyling, bitch. That's why. So then she's on the floor, and John Doe runs out, and she's on the floor bleeding from the throat, and that's how they find her, and it says that's the last thing I remembered. So that's like 20 pages into the book. I mean, I have a hard time writing 20 pages now. I was really into this. But yeah, so that was chapter 1 of The Turning, from the person, summarized by the person who wrote it, who doesn't remember. And I'm actually pretty impressed by my own writing. So we'll see where this goes. Have a good one.